And thank you to Dr. Baumgartner. And now I'm really excited to have another speaker, our final speaker, and talking about exercise, which is near and dear to my heart. That's what my research is too. And I have the pleasure of collaborating with Dr. Christiansen. So Cory Christiansen is a professor in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation here at the University of Colorado. And he's a rehabilitation researcher within the VA as well. He directs the Interdisciplinary Movement Science Lab here on the Anschutz campus, and his research focuses on optimizing rehab in older adults with movement dysfunction from a biopsychosocial perspective, with particular emphasis on exercise. He has conducted clinical trials research for the past 17 years, including a primary line of research related to Parkinson's. So welcome, Dr. Christiansen.
All right, thanks for sticking with us until the end here when we can talk about exercise. And actually, I've been here through all the talks, and exercise has come up several times. So my clinical degree is physical therapy, and so I'm a physical therapist, rehabilitation scientist. And as Dr. Amara said, I've been working with Parkinson's exercise research for quite a while. And I'm happy to answer questions that you have. I'm going to try to go a little bit quick through here because I don't think I need to convince you that exercise is beneficial. I want to talk a little bit about the evidence, the research evidence behind it, and then talk about some of the resources that we have locally here. So we'll talk about why we should exercise. Like I said, I'll go fairly quick through that, but I do think it's kind of cool to see the science behind it. So I'll show a little bit of that. And then what exercises should you do? We want to talk about that. And then sustaining exercise across the span of the lifespan and the disease span, and then local resources, like I said. So you probably all have in mind why you should exercise. And what I'll focus on today are the Parkinson's specific benefits of exercise and the Parkinson's specific research. Although we know the nervous system, the muscular system, the skeletal system, all benefit from anybody exercising regardless of disease status. So I'll focus on areas of Parkinson's related exercise research. And here are what I would say are the 6 biggest areas that people have researched: quality of life, physical function, brain health, physical health like cardiovascular health, mental health in terms of psychological health, and then disease modifying effects. And I think the disease modifying effects are the most exciting for our current research. So I'm going to show just a few studies, and I'll orient you a little bit to these graphs. I know we're not all researchers in the room, thank goodness, but I'm showing you just a few things that really kind of come to the surface. And so this is quality of life outcomes. Quality of life outcomes have been proven almost across the board for all exercise, all types of exercise. And quality of life is really dependent on the individual and how you define that. What, you know, if you think about your own life, what makes your life quality high or low? And you can think of different things. In this regard here, it shows anxiety, depression, and how experimental yoga, in this case, improves both of those measures as measured over 3 time points compared to a control group. And the control group here, this is a Journal of the American Medical Association article, a very high prestigious journal, JAMA. The control group here is actually resistance exercise, and in regard to yoga, the depression and anxiety scores improved more. Movement and physical function. As far as movement goes, there are a lot of measures of movement. You probably all have undergone different tests. There's, time to walking tests, chair rise tests, stair climb tests, sit to stand tests, those sorts of things. There's a few here listed. This is from a study that looked at low resistance cycling, like a recumbent cycle where you go high rep, but low resistance. And you can see some of the outcomes here that they've marked. And when you look at, when you look at this p-value, this means just the confidence that people have that there's a difference after exercise than there was before. And like 100% would be zero confidence that there's a difference. When the lower this number goes, the higher confidence is that there's a difference. And so motor symptoms, walking speed, ability to get up and out of a chair, walk, turn around, come back, functional reach test. This should say SS, force, square step test, and just simple reaction time all improve with this low resistance exercise training. This would be an endurance type of exercise. Brain health, we talked about, I'm not going to hit on that. There's a lot of benefits to brain health. We'll come back to a few specifics here. And those are just three examples, 3 or 4 examples of specific clinical trials, but there's been so much research, thousands of studies on exercise in people with Parkinson's. And so what has come up in the last 4 or 5 years, especially, are these syntheses of studies where you bring multiple studies together and you look at them. So I'm just going to go through a few, but I wanted to orient to how you read this, because I think it is helpful to know how to read the science, the scientific literature. And so oftentimes when you see these reviews, you'll see a forest plot. Forest plot is this little thing here. Maybe imagine these little trees in a larger forest. And what it is you look at comparing multiple studies, and these are the studies in the years they were done, and you look at how the exercise studied in this study compared to a control group. And if the dot is on one side of 0, it either favors exercise over a control group, and the control groups vary, but let's just say no exercise for now. Or if doing no exercise is favorable, or some other form of exercise. And you can see in this graph here, everything is above 0, showing that there's a benefit to exercise found in all of these studies. So I'm going to go through a few of these summaries, and they're going to compare a lot of different studies. And the more in science, the more the studies are replicated like that, the more confidence we have in the finding. So in terms of muscle strength and cardiorespiratory fitness, it's pretty solid evidence that studies are showing, and this triangle is the summary. Studies are showing that there's a benefit to muscle strength with resistance training. That would be like a weightlifting type of training. There's a benefit to heart and lung health with endurance training, like cycling or walking. We can go through multiple studies on mental health. This is just an example of multiple studies that have looked at benefit of depression with exercise. And you can see some interventions may do a little better than others, but overall, there's a benefit. The negative here means that there's less depression, that there's a benefit of exercise. And so disease-modifying effects are what our group is really interested in. And that means, can we affect the disease process with exercise? Or can a person affect their disease process personally with exercise? And so this is just from a review a couple of years ago, and there's one that came out this year as well. Physical exercise may have the ability to induce neuroplasticity. That means neurological change, okay? And research is still in its infancy. And several studies over the last few years have shown that that this trend is still positive. So this is just on one factor that was, so the way you would look at disease changes or neuroplasticity would be through imaging of the brain, or through blood circulating, so like blood tests or cerebral spinal fluid tests to look at circulating factors that would indicate higher or some indication of neurological benefit or neurological activity benefit. And one of these is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, And this has been looked at. It was shown initially with animal studies that endurance exercise improved BDNF. And now we see a series of 4 or 5 studies with humans that are indicating the same thing, a benefit in the experimental group compared to the control group. So preliminary evidence indicating that neurotrophic factors are benefited with exercise, but we need rigorous and standardized randomized control trials. And so that's what we're doing with our research here. And one of the studies, the largest exercise study in the nation right now, our site is one of those sites. It's called SPARKS-3. You saw the flyer for it out there, and I'll talk to it a little bit. Dr. Amara and I are both on that study, and it's going to be really exciting to see what we find from that. But probably more important to you is what exercises should you do, okay? And what I'll say, I'll start with the punchline. It really depends on your personal goals for exercise, okay? I'll focus a little bit on the disease modifying effects, but there are benefits to exercise that affect the way you walk, the way you move, your ability to do daily activities, your ability to go on, unlevel ground, your ability to get dressed, those sorts of things. They're all different types of exercise. So you also see in the community, and if you go to your physical therapist, they'll prescribe all sorts of different types of exercise. And these are some of the most common exercises that have been prescribed for people with Parkinson's, anywhere from dance, water-based activities was spoken to earlier, functional training, like if you go to your physical therapist and you talk to them about different functions that you do throughout the day, endurance training, whether it's cycling or walking, boxing, mind, body, like yoga and Tai Chi, and then strength training. So really how many are involved in a dance class or do dance? Okay, good. So for those of you not in the room, there was about 4 or 5 hands that went up. This is very common. I work closely with another faculty member who actually teaches these dance classes. And really the key things here are function and cardiovascular responses are very noticeable with dancing. It depends on the type of dance that you do. I don't know what type of dance this is right here. It depends on what type of dance that you're involved with as to how much your heart, but there's a lot of coordination training, balance training with dance. Water-based exercise, there's just as much research in this area of exercise as almost any. And so there's fairly strong evidence that water-based exercise it's not necessarily swimming. It could be water aerobics types of exercises, but it's in the pool, reduces some stress on the joints, as we talked about earlier today, but it can affect balance and daily living activity performance in particular. Functional training is kind of near and dear to my heart. That's like things that you do on a daily basis that you need, that you're having difficulty with. And so physical therapists in the clinic often focus on this area. And that's what I would recommend really as you start exercise with at any level for any mode of exercise, is connect with the physical therapist, even if it's a one-time visit. Like this is, you have recommendations for me. They can provide specific tests and identify specific deficits to give you really targeted intervention or a prescription, if you will, for exercise. And so these types of functional training should be kind of like helping you with specific things that you work on at home or with walking or those sorts of things have been shown to be beneficial. And there's a researcher, well, this research comes out of Boston University with Terry Ellis, and I work with her closely. And she's showing that everybody diagnosed with Parkinson's should see a physical therapist and kind of get a prescription for exercise. Boxing has not had as much research in it. And there are quite a few boxing classes in the community, as you probably have seen. If I asked, I'm sure about 4 or 5 people would raise their hands here. Balance, quality of life have been shown to be beneficial with boxing. Although mobility exercises, it's not that mobility is diminished with boxing, it's just that it's not as much of a strong effect in, like functional mobility with boxing. So there's a little less evidence base in boxing than in some of these other areas. We talked about Tai Chi and yoga a little bit. Balance is really a key fact. Like if you're having problems with balance, and that's really a key focus or goal for your exercise, Tai Chi and yoga have both been shown to be beneficial in that area. Strength training has a lot of research in that. I think when I think strength training, I'm thinking a lot of functional performance benefits like walking distance, walking speed, and those sorts of things. And this example here is resistance. These are resistance training, and you can see the strength versus the control. And this is called a 6-minute walk test. You may have done this before. How much ground can you cover in 6 minutes and still be safe? That's what that test looks at. Okay, and then I'll end the individual types with endurance training because that's where what we're looking at. And we had mentioned earlier endurance training about running and jogging. Most of the people we work with in endurance exercise aren't running and jogging. They're cycling or they're walking. And if you walk on a treadmill, you could walk, as fast as you can. Or if you need more resistance, you can walk on a slope. Right, so you still get the benefit, and you don't have to run or sprint, to get that benefit. So most of what we do in endurance is either cycling on a stationary bike or a recumbent stationary bike, or walking at a high. The key is to get your heart rate up to a moderate level of intensity. And so we showed that benefit in the Sparks 2 trial, which was at the University of Colorado here, and now the trial that we're in that you saw the flyer for is Sparks 3, which is a multi-site trial. Okay, so I'm going to stick with this one. If you look at all the different types of exercise that we looked at, this study that came out in 2023, it's a systematic review, compared all of these types. And they looked at where the strongest benefits were from. And you can see, if you depend on what you look at, if you look at quality of life, you can see a water exercise, endurance exercise, etc., how they kind of play out in terms of their benefit. And then we see disability and clinical related disease severity measures. You can see dance, water, multiple different types mixed together, endurance, exercise, strength, and resistance. The point being is that there's benefits from all these different types, and you should think about what works best for you, and your physical therapist can help you with this as well as your neurologist. The summary actually from this study just last year is there's not much evidence that there's differences between the exercise types. And there's a value for physical exercise, but we need more research as to identify what exact exercise type might be best depending on what your goals are. I'm sorry, my slides are not what they were, but this is how do you sustain exercise? So we spent a lot of time with this because as disease progresses, there's a natural barriers to rise. You think about, I don't know how long each of you in this room have been either living with someone or have had Parkinson's, but different things become more difficult or potentially a little easier to do depending on what your medication dose is, how long you've had the disease. There's a lot of factors. But I would say the exercise that you start, let's say you start exercise as soon as you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, 5 years later, that exercise is going to look different for you. Because you're going to modify your goals, and the disease is going to be modified. So how do you sustain exercise over time? One thing is to identify what motivates you for exercise. So you can just think for yourself, why would I exercise? I just gave you plenty of reasons, but there's personal reasons that you would exercise. Okay? And so I would suggest that you think about why you should exercise. You should never just exercise because your physical therapist tells you, or your spouse tells you. You should always listen to your spouse, don't get me wrong, but you should think about why should I exercise it? Because if you're not motivated, you're not going to do it. You might do it for a little while, just like a New Year's resolution, but you need to make it habitual, and you're not going to do that if you're not motivated to do that. So we work with our research participants and our patients to help them identify what their motivations are for exercise, because that'll help you to determine your exercise prescription. On the flip side, what keeps you from exercise? What are the barriers? And I'm sure if you think about what keeps you from exercise, you can come up, if I took a poll, we could write it down. I would do this in the classroom with the students. Okay, and we'd write them all down, and you'd come up with some list that looks like this. Health issues, pain, your symptoms, anxiety, sometimes depression can keep you. I just don't want to do it today. I don't feel up to it. Apathy, fatigue, low expectations of benefit. I hope you leave today. If you have low expectations of exercise benefit, please talk to me before you leave today, because there are clear benefits. Lack of time. I work and I'm tired at the end of the day. I work on the weekends. I have things to do with my family on, whatever it is for you, that there are barriers. And before you can really address those, you have to kind of think them through. So we encourage and work with people at identifying barriers, as well as facilitators and other aspects to help you to facilitate that sustainability of exercise. Is monitor for yourself. I see several people with smart watches on that'll give you a couple different indications of your exercise. Your intensity of exercise can be monitored with your heart rate monitor on your phone or your watch. The distance you walk can be monitored with that. How many steps you take in a day. I'm sure there's people in the room that monitor and see how close can I get to 10,000 steps per day. If you're getting 10,000 steps per day, you're doing better than most people. The average is like 7,500 steps in Colorado, and that's a little higher than nationwide. But the point being, monitoring can help you set the stage for, okay, what are my goals? And that's probably the next. What are my goals? What's my action plan? What do I plan to do? Where do I want to be 1 year from now with my exercise program? And you can get there if you set a plan. If you don't have a goal, it's hard to get to a goal. It's hard to reach it. So we encourage people on action planning. And then finally, for sustaining exercise, social support. And I see a lot, through lunch and through the day, I've seen a lot of people here with someone else. And that someone else, whether it's someone else who has Parkinson's, whether it's a care provider or a clinician, you have a social support network, and you can expand that. We'll talk a little bit about that. So finally, just a couple minutes, and then I want to get to your questions. What are local resources here that you might have? And you probably have some to add to this. This is not exhaustive. This is just a little bit of the network that I'm involved with. So Parkinson's Association of the Rockies has a booth out there. And among other things, they provide a lot of resources, but they also provide exercise classes in the community. And I think they provide over 50 exercise classes on the Front Range. Might go from Pueblo to Cheyenne. And we work with them in some research, and their exercise instructors are outstanding. They have everything from boxing to yoga to cycling to dance, everything. And so I would check them out And it doesn't matter if you're here, if you got here and, you know, from your bed this morning, you have one of these classes is close to you. Parkinson's Point has a booth out there. I didn't know either of them would have their booth out there, so I'm shamelessly plugging both of them. I partner with this group too. It's a smaller group. It has exercise classes. They're based out of Littleton, and they do outstanding work. And they partner with physical therapists as well. So I look at Parkinson's Point again. I'm sure they both have flyers out there. The Davis-Finney Foundation is a national foundation. You probably know about it. It is based in Colorado, but it's a national foundation. And the reason I put it up here is they really have partnered with this exercise class, pedaling for Parkinson's. And there are several pedaling, so that these are cycling. Davis-Finney was a professional cyclist. These are cycling classes that are in the community that would be, they're not, these are stationary cycles. And this is a research-based, evidence-based program. And then we have research studies that you can get into exercise. And we've heard about all of these, I think. Well, this one not today, okay? This one, Mark Magnago is a colleague of mine. He's in our Parkinson's Exercise Research Consortium. This is a resistance training, like a strength training program with using blood flow restriction. Don't need to know the details other than it helps you to exercise at a lower intensity to get the benefit of high intensity resistance training. And we're trying it for the first time with Parkinson's. And Mark's PhD student, Lauren, his contact is right here, and her phone number. She didn't give me her last digit. I'll give you another phone number. That's not a good phone number. But Lauren Van Valkenburg at CU Anschutz. This is a very interesting study. I'm a part, full disclosure, I'm a part of that. This is Dr. Amara's study, and you have her contact information on other things, but this study here, the neurological research partners, this has been up there several times. This is the EXCITE-PD study, looking at cognition, sleep, and brain imaging outcomes related to exercise. Very important, because we talk about rigidity and postural instability and slowness of movement as kind of some of the core cardinal signs and symptoms of Parkinson's, but sleep problems are another major problem for people with Parkinson's. Although after a day of listening to research talks, you'll have plenty of sleep this afternoon and evening. Social prescription for people with Parkinson's disease. Occupational therapist, there's an occupational therapy partner at Colorado State University. We've identified that people, even though they're exercising with groups or in the community, loneliness is a major problem. And exercise can help with that. And that's what this study is all about, looking at the effect of exercise on loneliness. And then I'll end with our SPARK study, which we've already talked about, but I can't say enough about this. This is a site, about 28 sites, North America. We have one in Canada at the University of Alberta. And we're looking, and both groups here exercise. So there's a control group, but the control group exercises at a lower intensity than the high intensity group. And what we don't know the level of intensity. It may be that that it's just the cyclic walking, like you would do as you go into your car, that level of intensity, or it could be that the intensity is really key, and then you have to get that heart rate up to about 85%, 80 to 85% of your heart rate max. The cool thing about this is you'll be training with our trainer, and you can do this exercise at home. We provide treadmills for you to work at home if you don't have one. So Kat, some of you may have been in this study. Kat is our local coordinator. She's like the nicest person that I've ever worked with. Sparks3 at ucdenver.edu. And so if you have any questions. So this is our Parkinson's Exercise Research Consortium. Several people you probably know or you've seen today, including Dr. Amara. But I'd like to answer any questions you might have on exercise specific to Parkinson's. Thanks for your time.
with Denver Rec.
Yeah, you wanna take the microphone?
I'd like to put a little plug in for Denver Rec for people who are residents in Denver. They have several locations have indoor pools and do classes throughout the year. They have organized classes, exercise classes, as well as the weight and the cardio training. And it's free for Denver residents.